All right, hey, welcome to a podcast with two of my favorite people, Jerry and Cathie. We're Harbor Covenant Church, and Harbor Covenant Church has been active in Gig Harbor since the early '80s. But even beyond Gig Harbor, it's built relationships with people and organizations all around the globe. And so we've been doing this podcast series called Harbor Cove Tales, where we highlight and explore stories throughout the generations of many people that call Harbor Cove home. And today we get to hear from Jerry and Cathie about one of their passions, one of their goals, just the way that the things that matter to them in India, far on the other side of the world. So Jerry and Cathie, welcome. And let's start off by doing a little introduction. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you've been involved with Harbor Covenant over the years.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I'll start. We actually started going to this church right after it was founded in early 1980, and then became involved and active. I was hired as the office administrator in 1985.
That's right, you've been on staff here.
I've been on staff and worked here until I retired in 2005. So 20 years, I guess, something like that.
And was Jerry always with you, or did you drag him along later?
I got him drug along later.
How'd that happen?
Well, I started coming to Harbor Covenant with Cathie in the early 80s, periodically. And then over the years through the mentorship of Ernie Hansen, the pastor at the time, and some of the founding members of the church, I finally joined the church, but I did not find Christ until I was in my 50s. And so I'm, relatively speaking, a newer believer than a lot of people are.
Let's take a minute real quick because now I want to hear this story. So how did that happen? How did you find Christ in your 50s?
A collision course with what I worshiped. And what I worshiped was a lot of work. I think that was a lot of it. And then I was also experiencing severe anxiety, depression, and, the kind of darkness that a lot of people experience. And I had always tried to remedy that through various means, work, drinking too much at times, those kinds of things. And I think I was an unpleasant person. And so
Cathie, can you confirm?
She would confirm.
Can confirm. Unpleasant person. Okay.
Not.
She will neither deny nor confirm. But at any rate, I finally, at some point, I was in the mountains, and I finally just went face down into the dirt and said, I surrender. This is not working for me, so I'll try you for a while. And then for the last, 25, 30 years, my life is different.
That's awesome. And so it's really out of that transformation in your life and yours too, that you are committed to seeing that in other people, right?
That really is true. My own experience, the transformational power of Christ, is really important to me. And I'm not an evangelist or a church planter, but I think that Cathie and I are pretty relational. And that gives us an opportunity to connect with people. Our journey really started out as teaching peacemaking in South Asia, and so we have a considerable track record of that and still doing it. But over the course of time, we've become so connected with many, many people in India, people that are committed to Christ. They've committed their life to serving the poor. The widows, the orphans, the aliens among us. And we've just been attracted to that. And
You've been attracted to the people.
Yeah.
It's always the people. Yeah.
And we'll get into what is it about the people that you have grown to love here in a bit. When you guys aren't in India and you're here in Gig Harbor, how else do you guys stay involved with? Or you got grandkids, you got great grandkids. Like what's life like when you're not in India?
Well, Jerry's still working part-time. So he's in his office a lot, has a lot of phone calls and just paperwork besides meetings. And I still volunteer here at the church, and I work at the Furniture Bank a couple days a month. And I love to read, and I love to garden, and we spend time with our kids and our grandkids when we can, when they're not busy.
Yeah, they're a busy bunch.
Which is the challenging part. So yeah, life has been very good for us.
And I would just add that in regard to the church, Cathie and I we're part of a small group and have been for, a long time.
Several small groups, actually.
Several small groups. In addition, I have breakfast once a week with guys from the church, or most of them are. And then periodically I meet with some other guys. We just, have a beer and talk about issues of life or scripture, that kind of thing. And Cathie, why don't you talk about your connections with other people too?
They know about our prayer ladies.
We did a whole podcast on the prayer ladies. You can go back and read that one or listen to that one.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I've been impressed with your guys' commitment to your faith and living that out. You're definitely one of the two of the people in our community that really make Harbor Cove go. So, but as long as I've been here, I came in 2015. I've known you guys as the India people, besides the Cochrans, who are missionaries that we support through YWAM. But I know that you are highly connected to relief and outreach efforts in India, sometimes with YWAM and the Cochrans, and other times just connections that you've made. So tell us a little bit about the relationships that you've built, how you got connected there, and I don't know what you enjoy about folks on the other side of the country.
So in 2003, Cathie and I planned a trip to South Asia, with the focus being Thailand. We just wanted to go hang out in Thailand, northern Thailand.
Just on vacation or just?
Yeah, real vacation.
Okay.
I mean, we were actually going to take a vacation. Weird. And so Cathie said, well, goody, then we can go see Steve and Liz, who were in Pune, India at the time. And we had been in India, 10 years before during Muslim Hindu riots, and it was a mess. And so I said, I don't think I want to do that. And so we were scheduling, but Cathie persuaded me. And so we were scheduled to meet with him at the first part of our Thailand trip. And then we learned, as our trip got closer, we learned that Steve could not be there. And I'm thinking, goody, we're not going to go then, are we? If Steve's not there, we're not going.
Let's stay by the pool.
and so I was secretly gloating. But then Steve and Liz said, but Steve will be back at such and such a date, which coincided perfectly with the end of our Thailand trip. So we ended up going to Pune, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my entire life, one of those milestone things where God was at work in our lives. And so Steve and Liz were in a leadership role, and they were just confounded and continually bothered, that's too light a word, distracted by the conflict within their ministry teams. Believe it or not, ministry teams have conflict.
What?
Yeah, I know. I know.
Didn't know.
Yeah, all new. As they say, where the 2 or 3 are gathered, Christians gathered, there will be conflict. That's what we say. So at any rate, they asked, they knew a little bit about my background and, of course, Cathie's background in office management, and asked us if we would take on teaching peacemaking in South Asia. And I'm kind of clueless at times and a little bit, rash.
Cathie can't confirm. Clueless and rash. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So we said, sure.
No, we didn't say sure. You did.
Okay.
And I'm going, what?
I was just here on vacation.
That's right. We were just here to encourage them not to take on. But you did concur. And so Cathie and I came back. We discovered a ministry called Peacemaker Ministries. And we took every training, every course they offered, became deeply enmeshed in those guys, read 105 books on cross-cultural peacemaking, cultural anthropology, Christian peacemaking. I mean, we have a library that I think is pretty stunning because we just diligently read all this stuff. And then so 2006, Steve says hey, would you guys be up for teaching some peacemaking in Bangladesh? And we said, Bangladesh? Yeah, get out my atlas and, oh, there it is. South Asia. Okay, sure, we'll be glad to do that. And then shortly thereafter, Steve said, as long as you're in Bangladesh, how about doing this in Nepal too?
Steve sounds like a great guy just to be like, hey, and while you're here, do you want to like wash my car? And
that's exactly.
And how about these people over here? And
Yeah. So we said, and Cathie and I had a long history with Nepal. I mean, for years prior to that. So we'd been there a number of times, and we said, go to Nepal? Are you kidding? Of course we'll do that. That's fun. We have friends there, and so it's going to be great. And then he says, as long as you're that close, how about going down to Lonavala in India and doing this whole thing again? So he said, okay. So that was our inaugural trip in doing this. But we met people. We met people in Bangladesh that we're still connected with, and we've seen since then. People in Lonavala, there's, how many people are we connected and love and who connect with us? And so out of all of that, then over the years, then we've taught peacemaking in Kyrgyzstan, West Africa, Singapore, I don't know. Kyrgyzstan. Okay, said that. India, Nepal. I mean,
wow.
Yeah.
Over. Cathie, maybe you can take a turn in this one. You've in all the learning and research and experience in teaching peacemaking, what are some key things that have been that you guys always kind of hit on, or I don't know. I've never studied peacemaking, so you got like a brief 2-minute elevator version.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the hardest thing we have to teach is how people go to each other personally and ask forgiveness. And in a culture that's a shame-based culture, which India is, it's very, very difficult to get that concept across. We can teach, how to forgive, how to confess, how to do all the kind of technical things, but this whole business of actually presenting your heart to another person is very, very challenging. And we don't know the results of all our teaching. We feel we are seed planters and that God is the one that has to water. So we teach, we do everything we possibly can to get the concepts across, and then we leave. So there's no follow-up. We know several people that do use the teaching actively. All the member care people in YWAM teach it. But it is challenging, and it's fun, and we get a lot of questions, and sometimes we see people sleeping. So
yeah. So yeah, you leave, but you've built relationships with people there. And I know that some of the relationships you've built with people, I think, tune in and worship with us online every Sunday. So, the connections you've made across the world. Tell us about some of the things that the people you work with. What do you like about them?
In this last trip that Cathie and I took, we're very mindful of the fact that the government of India currently is very anti-Muslim, anti-Christian, anti-Sikh, and is very, very much pro-Hindu. There's a Hindu movement that is pretty intolerant of any faith other than that, to the extent that there are two things that have happened. One is that there's a sweeping through many of the states in India, what's called the anti-conversion laws. And that's basically that you can be fined up to, I don't know, some enormous amount of money, $10,000, and
if you convert,
5 years in prison if you are suspected of attempting to convert somebody.
Is there punishment for actually, like, as an individual converting, or it's just?
I don't think so. It's the converter that gets hammered.
And actually, before I got a question. I always thought Hinduism, and this is just maybe my ignorance, was one of the more tolerant religions where they would welcome in other faiths or something like that. So is that incorrect, or is this a new?
No, I think that has been, and I think we all understood Hinduism at one point would say, hey, what's another god? This guy Jesus sounds like, well, we'll add him to Shiva and,
Yeah.
all the rest of them. But that is not the case now. There's been this movement toward really serious persecution of Christians.
And what's the gain, do you think, by the government?
You know what I think it is? It's one of those things of look over there, distraction of people. Plus the prime minister is a pretty hardcore fundamentalist Hindu who truly, I think, believes that India is for Hindus and everybody else.
And I think the gain is that he by doing this, he can keep a lot of the lower caste people from being educated. And then you have control over the people because they just accept what's there before them. And so there's no arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that the current administration has not done some good things, but they have. But they also did another thing that's been very troubling. They passed a thing called the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. And basically what that means is that if you're a nonprofit doing good works in India, this act requires you to be licensed. And if you don't measure up to their standards, licensing standards, then you're suspended or kicked out of the country. And it put a little more flesh on that. So, for example, I think it was in December, World Vision, that scary organization, World Vision, had their license suspended. And it's based on the whole idea that there's foreign money coming into the country, and that money is then devoted to ministries that are contrary to the administration's goals and desires. And I think so. As World Vision has been suspended, there was Compassion International last year, I think, was just plain kicked out. And so ministry groups like Youth with a Mission are walking a fine line right at the moment. And this would be devastating to their ministries if they somehow got shut down. There's already been some scrutiny. We know of several cases where YWAMers or YWAM-like people have been seriously interrogated and threatened and coerced and a whole bunch of things. So, those are some of the realities that Cathie and I were looking at as we went, and to the point where we didn't post anything at Facebook for the first 3 weeks we were there. And
because you guys just went, right? When was the last time you went?
We were there for the month of February this year. Yeah. We just didn't post anything because we wanted to keep everything on the down low. Bought a couple of tourist books, so if we ever got questioned, I could whip out my Dark Planet or Lonely Planet tourist book.
We're just tourists, sir.
We're just tourists. So at any rate, that's kind of the cloud that hovers right now over ministries in India. But what we've discovered is that while things like church planting and direct evangelism is pretty much not going to happen very much, or if you do that, there's a lot of risk involved. But what does work are what they call mercy ministries, and so that's like ground level medical assistance type things, schools, tailoring classes, Kath, jump on
orphanages, children's homes. Yeah.
And so the way I think I can speak for Cathie in this too, we really love that, because I'm not an evangelist for one thing, nor a church planter, but I can get my mind around, developing a school or literally planting seeds, literally what we call the hands and feet of Christ.
So all these programs, and do you have any stories of individuals that have really benefited from them? I'm thinking like, do you know of anyone that's benefited from the sewing programs I guess I'm just looking for.
Well, we know
stories.
Adults that are now in YWAM that have been raised in orphanages. Christian orphanages. Yeah. So yes, not and the children. I mean, there are YWAM ministries that own buses that take them to the slums and educate the kids inside the bus in the slums. Yeah. So, and they have medical vans and they have medical camps where they just go and bring a doctor and out to the villages and the slums and do their medical work right
So
in
it's
the
way
village.
more than just Jesus loves me, this I know.
Oh,
It's
yes, very much
caring
so.
for the physical, emotional, educational,
Yes.
financial needs.
Yes.
But
in
one,
a very needed area.
give you a little more context. We have a good friend who whose wife was a hardcore YWAMer, and he's kind of comes from that tradition background as well. Started a school up north in West Bengal 3 years ago, and we have pictures from our visit with them 3 years ago where they were just putting down the footings for their building. And on this trip, we went back to see them, and we spent the better part of a week with them. And there's this thriving 2-story schoolhouse with grades K through 8, I think.
Primary, yeah, like
Yeah.
3 through
Yeah.
8th grade. Yeah.
And they're pouring footings for a bigger school, and they will say that no, we're not. Well, they start their school day with prayer, and they're not overtly Christian, but they're the way they conduct themselves, the way they approach the kids, the parents, all of this stuff is, lined up with their Christian faith. So it's kind of like the hands and feet,
Here's an interesting question, and I wonder how you've thought about this. Does anyone ever criticize you for being sneaky like that, for not being truly honest about your motives, or is that not fair? Because our motives are education, and our motives are, I mean, to kind of say, hey, we're not to get through all of the barriers. You kind of have to be quiet about your faith. Is
I think
is that sneaky though?
Here's the way I would see it: is a tailoring class a good thing? Oh yeah, it's a great thing. Kids learning to read and write, that's good. That's good. My faith in Christ, that's great. So our motivation then is out of our faith in Christ and just wanting to serve the Lord by being the hands and feet of Christ. And I've thought about that. Why can't we just be more overt about what we're up to? But that comes with a lot of risk, and I don't think we ultimately serve God by kind of picking a theological fight over things.
Yeah, if they want to continue their ministry, they have to do everything they can to just be wise and careful. Yeah. And many of the places have the full support of the police and the politicians in the villages.
Oh, interesting. So they've seen the good and the benefit. And
Right.
It's just from the highest of highest.
Right.
So okay.
Yeah. Because they do provide so much good, and that's exactly why they're allowed to continue their ministries, is because they do a lot of good for the kids and for the adults. There's a lot of, oh my goodness, during COVID, I can't even begin to tell you how many millions of tons of rice were given out. Rice, oil, eggs, milk, bananas. I mean, and that's all done out of charity, out of, people donating funds. And that's how the vans are run. But the school buses, the medical vans, it's all done by contribution.
So let's talk about what you guys are supposed to do with your retirement. You guys are definitely in the retirement age, and most people would want to sit down, play with their grandkids, great grandkids, visit California, Florida. Yet you have chosen in this phase of your life to be about something bigger and about something more. So why, I guess, is the main question. It's like, why does this matter to you?
I think God has called us to this ministry. We didn't start this on our own. That's for sure. Steve and Liz invited us. I think God prodded us to take on this whole ministry, and it's been so completely fulfilling for us. It's not just the teaching. In fact, the teaching has been important, but it's the people. Yeah, it's always the people. And, the hard part is getting to be good friends with people, and then they start sharing their hearts. And that was the difficult thing on this trip, is because we had dinner with people every night, different people every night, and heard their stories. And their stories are difficult and challenging. They all serve the Lord full time. They don't have time for a job, which is something that our Western minds can't grasp.
Don't have time for a job because they're serving.
Yeah.
Huh.
And when it takes a missionary 2 hours to walk from his home to the village where he's ministering because he doesn't have a motor scooter, then that's 2 hours out of his life that he can't devote to ministry or work.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
So there's belief in the benefit of a faith-based ministry and opportunities enough where they're willing to sacrifice almost everything to
Absolutely.
the benefit is worth that.
Absolutely.
And so then you guys and other organizations coming alongside to help support that has been
that seems to be the case. And I want to just touch on that briefly. If you recall, I think it was November or December, Sally Cross and the quilting people didn't auction it. They sold raffle tickets for a quilt that had been put together, and then the funds went directly to a place in India for their tailoring classes, for materials, teacher expenses, rental, maybe buy some more machines, that kind of thing. And then on the heels of that, the churches, it's not a benevolent committee. It's the one that Barbara Moret chairs.
the mission involvement team.
Yeah, mission involvement team. Heard a presentation by a guy from India that was staying with Cathie and I, and awarded his ministries, which are Mercy Ministries, $1,000. And on the heels of that, we were approached by a couple in our church who said, $1,000? Well, we can do that. So another $1,000 rolled in. Another couple said, okay, we can do that too. Another $1,000 rolled in. Another couple said, here's $1,200. So that rolled in. And another person walked up to me after church and said, hey, I found this piece of paper in my pocket. It was a $100 bill. So it's just like this. We really didn't ask anybody at all. I mean, they know what we're up to, but all of a sudden here's this flood of resources, and that money went to all kinds of ministries, personal needs, and we still have a chunk of it that will be.
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
we used it all. Yeah.
The latest example where that money went was there's a Rohingya refugee camp that is in Bangalore, India, and the refugees are the Rohingya refugees are the Muslims who have been forced out of or fled what we now call Myanmar, but used to be Burma. A terrible persecution, and so there's this community slum in Bangalore, and they're under extreme persecution from not just the authorities, but from other groups there in the community. And their livelihood is rag picking and recycling plastic
And aluminum and whatever else.
Yeah, whatever
they
they can
hands
get.
on.
And so they pick up their stuff, get it to the wherever they take it, and get pennies for huge amounts. But an evil bunch came along and broke up their rickshaws, their pedal rickshaws. So that kind of takes away your ability to deliver stuff. And so through the generosity of somebody in our church, we were able to purchase the parts for a couple of rickshaws.
Two new rickshaws.
Two new rickshaws.
Yeah.
And they're like little tiny flatbed trucks, 3-wheelers. And some poor guy gets on that and pedals. And it looks painful to me. But that kind of put them back into business. And I think the total cost on that was what, $600, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
$600. 2
And back in
rickshaws can change their lives.
So what's next for you guys? What are you guys working on now? How can people get involved? Sounds like some people know about what you got going on.
What we're working on now is trying to get a 501c3
A
put
nonprofit,
together
yeah.
so that people have a way to donate on a regular basis, which would help us tremendously. And that would be a tax-free way of them donating to the ministries in India and Bangladesh and Nepal if there's a need there. But
Is this connected to another organization you guys believe in, or is this just something that you guys want to do? That's through Jerry and Cathie and their love for Jesus.
And we actually have a 3-person board of directors. Yeah. And you'll love the name of tell Matt and Josh the name of our
South Asia Compassion, Mercy, and Justice.
Oh, look at what you guys did.
I know. We asked if we could do that.
Sack MJ.
That's right.
So, listeners, Compassion, Mercy, and Justice is one of our organizing principles. And if Jerry and Cathie aren't 2 people that live that out, I don't know who is. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And really, I've got to say this on the video, and that the biggest need is monthly support for people, because they get support, but it's not on a regular basis, and they can't figure out how to live their lives when they don't have a known amount of money coming in each month. And we have one family that we dearly love that has 7 kids, 5 of whom are adopted from relatives who have died. And I mean, they educate all these kids, and that costs money because they won't send them to the government schools, which are horrible.
Yeah.
So they
not
go to
very
private
reliable.
schools, and they have to pay fees. If they don't have income, they can't count on paying for their kids' school fees. And that's across the board of everyone who has children. So it gets desperate at times, and it's hard for us because we get all the information.
Yeah.
And
But
usually can't do anything about it.
But I want to just tell you one really cool thing that happened with this family that Cathie is referring to. They have a car, and this thing is like
Jalopy.
it is a piece of junk. I mean, it really is bad. It was worn out when they acquired it, and it's not any better. But they have like mom and dad and these 7 kids. And so they are in desperate need of bigger vehicle to get all these people around. And so we were actually talking to them 2-3 days ago, a couple of days ago. And Mary says, guess what happened? We said, what happened? Somebody gifted to them the equivalent of about $10,000. I mean, this just came like out of nowhere. And so that's about half the price of a halfway decent car. Yeah. So just, here it is. And so things like that happen a lot, that are just, the probability of that kind of thing happening is, similar to the Mariners winning the World Series,
It's getting better. It's getting better, I think.
Yeah, it might get better, yeah.
I had one last question before I'll let you guys kind of share anything that you haven't already, but I'm just aware of how big India is. I went to go visit, I think back in 2005. No, 2000.
You were there for a couple of weeks, as I recall.
2000. I think it was like 2012. I went visited Bangalore, and I visited Kolkata. And I mean, you can't deny how many people are there and how big poverty is, and the needs, for lack of a better word, are endless.
Mm-hmm,
So you're a couple here in Gig Harbor trying to coordinate meeting some of those needs with the realization they probably won't meet all of them. How do you keep going with that?
I think the only thing that keeps us going is a lot of prayer and hope. It's hard. In fact, you've almost got me in tears now because it is hard when you know and love people and you can't help One of our dearest friends right now is desperate need for shoulder surgery. $4,000 he doesn't have, we don't have. So we just pray and wait. And he's in excruciating pain, and he's only 24 years old. Yeah. Yeah. And he's
a convert to Christianity. So he really gets it.
Yeah. Out of Muslim background.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really hard. So it feels sometimes very burdensome.
But I want to say, on the other hand, we have the coolest life. I mean, we do. Yeah. I mean, we've met people and been to places that people don't go to. And to me, it's just been completely fascinating. So, Cathie,
there's both sides of it.
Yeah, the other side of it. This trip, we got to spend a week in a northern state of India called Sikkim. Nobody goes there, but we had a personal friend from Nepal who met us there and was our guide for the better part of a week. We did post some pictures of that on Facebook and some of the roads and the rain.
Those were our Buddhist friends, so that's when we went to the Buddhist park and yeah.
So as we wrap up, is there any other things we haven't talked about that you want people to know about or you want to share?
Yeah, I think what we do need is we absolutely do need prayer that we get this 501c3 off the ground. I mean, we've been messing with it for over a year now, and it's just like we keep running into stone walls.
Yeah.
So we need to get that off the ground. And this is such an incredibly generous church. So I think one of our big things is, how do we get this thing off the ground? How do we market it? How do we kind of get our act together better, I guess.
And I really appreciate doing this video because we need to get the word out to people of the needs and pray that people's hearts will open up and be willing to be generous.
And the other thing I would just add, final thing, I guess, is that the probability of our returning to India is probably pretty high. And so we've taken people with us in the past. The Crosses have been, Tom and Verna been, Eric, when he was here in the church, has been there with us. A couple of other people that are not church people, but we took with us. And so, we're not tour guides, but we're fairly easy to get along with, and we know how to navigate through the mean streets of Bombay.
Okay. You guys go. You guys got someone wanted to go to India and do some good. And got two people that show you.
Right.
Now, would you guys be doing any peacemaking stuff or just generally connecting with relationships that you've already built and checking in? What would a trip like that look like for someone? I
think our last trip was probably pretty prototypical in that we had 3 days of teaching peacemaking in La Navla. And that was kind of the end of the peacemaking teaching.
No. Then when we went to East Maharashtra and stayed a week in a town called Udgir, this is where our friend's dad has 7 pastors under him, and they all minister in the 60 different villages around there. And we taught the pastors peacemaking for 3 mornings.
That's right. That's right.
Systemic, sustainable.
Yeah. And I just got a note from Nitin this morning that they're continuing the teaching.
Okay.
So that's very exciting. Okay. Yeah.
So how do people get in touch with you? Shoot you an email?
We have email. We have Messenger. We have
a landline.
Oh, you still got a landline?
Yeah, we have a landline.
What is a landline?
Has little buttons on it, and you can call. Yeah.
Is there an email we can kind of publicize right now? You want to say it?
Yeah. Yes. Mine is Corky, Corky, Gates @gmail.
Mine is Victor 4 LRS. It's VICTOR FOUR LRS @gmail.com.
So anyone listening or watching want to learn more or participate in some way, that's how you can do it.
I just want to close this way. And it's the money is great, but the money seems to show up, not on our timeline usually, but I think a lot of reach out to us. We just love to talk about India.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's if somebody reached out to us, it's not going to be like, how much money can you pony up? I mean, that's not the way we operate. It's, you know, can we just tell you about some of the people that we know? Can we show you some pictures of some of the ministries that we're aware of? You know, I think that's so. I would love for people to contact us that are just interested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or do you want to go to Nepal and look at Everest? Well, come with us.
I'd look at it. I don't know if I'd go like climb it. Oh, there it is.
Yeah,
It's the giant mountain.
yeah, stuff like that.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for.
Yeah,
Well, I just want to give credit to what God's done in both of your lives to really inspire you to just live a full life, full of service and compassion, mercy, and justice, and for the ways that you've helped lead our church either on staff or indirectly just by being great people. So blessings on your ministry and your nonprofit. And and if anyone else has a Harbor Cove tale that they want to tell about the stuff they got going on, you can contact me, Matt at harborcove.church, and we can tell your story as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.